All right, joining me now, Dan Greenburg of Barstool Sports. You can find him at Stool Greeny. Thank you so much for hopping on. Let's talk Celtics. Let's talk pretty much the best team in the league. I think we got to say that right now. It has been an unbelievable run to begin this season, 22-6 so far. We are recording this just after they put up 144 points on a team for the second time in a row. Uh, it has been an awesome run, Greeny.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to say it's better than expected because, they started 21-5 last year. They were the prohibitive favorites coming into the season. But what we're watching, I think, it's better than I think even people like myself envisioned, just because they just feel more balanced on both ends. They're beating really good teams basically every single night. They have the toughest schedule in the league so far. Most wins in the NBA so far, best record, all that good stuff. Not perfect by any means, but in terms of where we are heading into Christmas, it's hard to, have too many complaints.
Hard to have too many complaints, I think, is the right answer here. Second best net rating, although 0.1 behind Philly on cleaning the glass. I gotta get that rightened up a little bit. But we were talking before. Strength of schedule has been a thing for this team. They've played tough teams. They've played above 500 teams, and it just doesn't matter who they're facing. They're undefeated at home. They've been washing everybody on both ends of the floor, and it has been impressive to say the least. I think before the season, we talked about this team having more talent, especially in that starting lineup, than pretty much every team in the NBA, and I think we can definitively say that now. How are they doing this? What are they doing? Is it just taking stuff more seriously? What has been the key here for demolishing these teams?
So there's two sets of Celtic teams really that we've learned through the first 28 games. There's the Celtics with Porzingis and how they play with Porzingis, and there's the Celtics without Porzingis. Like today, and against Golden State, they didn't have Porzingis in the lineup. Today they shot 53 threes. Against the Warriors, they shot 58. So their same sort of Missoula ball, high volume three approach is still there and it's still effective. What's different is the Porzingis element. They're third in post-up frequency as a team behind only Denver and the Sixers, who obviously have the two most dominant centers in the league. So fair. I think a lot of Celtic fans wanted a more diverse offense, ways to attack switches. Like the biggest issue that we saw was last year versus Miami. When a team would switch against them, they stall. Well, now when Porzingis is on the floor, you put him at the free throw line, you give him the ball, and he just turns around and shoots over everybody. And he has been so good and as both a rim protector and just this three-level scorer that they did not have last year or any year during the Tatum and Brown era. So Porzingis is a huge factor to that. Derrick White making this, insane all-star caliber level leap has been, probably the second most important part to their start. And I just think they're learning from their mistakes in terms of, their execution in late moments can be, stagnant at times, but then when everybody's healthy, looks so much more better and more fluid. So combine that with more experience from Missoula. It's like you add it all up and you get this version that when they play to their potential, I think this is the team we all expect to see.
Absolutely. It is always fun, I think, to get the second year of the development from the coach and understanding this is the style that you want to play. This is everybody buying in. This is what it looks like when players are going the same direction, know what is expected of them, and then executing the game plan. It helps to get guys like Drew Holiday. It helps to get guys like Kristaps Porzingis. But the other guy that you mentioned was Derrick White. Like, he has been a revelation. We talked about him in our first check-in, I think, but has just been awesome. Yeah, somehow he's just improving. And one of my questions to you was, how many All-Stars do you think this team deserves at this point? Because I think you can make a case for four guys, and none of those guys are Drew Holiday.
Yeah, I would say it's probably more realistic to say they would be capped at 3, but I think with how good everybody is, and especially with two of those guys potentially being at the guard spot and how many good guards there are in the league, I bet you they end up with 2. It's just hard to pick who that second guy is going to be if you're going to go Porzingis, who's been incredible in his minutes and his opportunities. You have Jaylen Brown, who's been pretty lights out as an All-NBA guy for about a month now, since the win over Milwaukee at the end of November. But then you have Derrick White doing things like today. He became the first guard in NBA history with 3 straight games with 3 blocks or something like that. So it's like you have a guy who's giving you, all NBA defense with the best, 42% from 3, 16, 17 a game. He's guarding the best player, on the perimeter every night if it's a guard. So it's hard to leave him off. So I don't think you can go wrong. And honestly, Tatum has probably had the slowest start out of everybody, and he's a shoo-in to be, a starter. So I would like to see Derrick get it, but I bet you it's going to be a Porzingis or Jaylen just because of the positions.
Yeah, just defaulting to where everybody thought this team would be, it wouldn't surprise me if it's just Tatum and Brown, and that's where everybody sees how the bread is kind of buttered for this particular team. But it is interesting with Derrick White specifically. Not so secretly last year, he was the best defensive guard on the team, despite it being Marcus Smart on the team. Like I thought that Derrick White was better. I thought that he was more dynamic and a player that they could use in more situations. And I think even with Drew Holiday, who is a tremendous defender in his own right this year, I think that Derrick White's been just as good, if not better than him too. It's just, I have nothing but good things to say about Derrick White and what he provides to this team. It is a different layer, even than when he was traded. It was a little bit shaky. When he was like in this last year, it was good but not perfect. Now it is like the idealized version of Derrick White.
Yeah, I think when he got traded here, obviously it takes some time to get acclimated, learn the system. So you say, okay, that's not a pass, but it's like, all right, let me see what it looks like after an offseason.
Sure.
Well, in that same offseason, then they bring in Malcolm Brogdon. So it's like, wait, I just had this great run. We made the finals, but now you have another, 5th, 6th starter coming in at his position. Now, not only does he have complete control of the backcourt, where even though Holiday is there, from the second we got to camp, what did Missoula say? Is that Derrick White's our starting point guard. So he's been empowered. You can see he's playing with way more confidence than he ever has as a Celtic. He just feels more comfortable calling his own number and being aggressive. And the fact that he has worked on his shot to the point where now you're surprised when he isn't putting up 40% seasons from 3 is miles and miles and miles away from where he was when he first got there, where you're thinking, okay, it'd be great if Derrick shot like 35%, 36%. Now he's shooting in the low 40s on 7 to 8 threes a game, which is like Steph Curry production. So it's like you're doing that, but then you're also adding all NBA defense. He's going to make so much money on his extension. It's going to have to be a max, I think, at this point.
He's unbelievable. And any team that has a star, is just going to want him as the guy that complements their star. He does everything you want as a complementary piece, to the point where he can put up all-star numbers. Even within that has been really impressive.
They needed Tatum sat against Sacramento. He had 30. So it's or 28, whatever it was. So it's like, if you need him to do that, this new and improved ball Derrick White he can shapeshift into whatever role the team needs. It's incredible.
It's the most talented starting lineup in the league. I'm not sure if it's the best. I'm not sure if it fits the best. We still need to see it over the course of the entire year, I think, to really evaluate it. But this is the most talented starting lineup, and I think that was pretty clear from the jump. But the guys off the bench, Sam Hauser, Al Horford, Peyton Pritchard, those are the 3 guys that have played the most minutes. What have you seen from that group? What have you liked from the way that that Joe Mazzulla has deployed those guys into a manner of a kind of playoff rotation?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the entire bench, probably through the first week and a half of the season, could not make a shot. And you're thinking, oh my God, the 6 through 9 guys are shooting 28% from 3. Like, this is it. This was supposed to be the depth in the playoff rotation. Since the first week of the season, they've all responded and are back to shooting, low 40s, high 30s, right? So now you're thinking, okay, if we can just stagger, whether it's Tatum and Drew with the bench, and then you have Porzingis and Jaylen as because basically what Joe does, he has that first sub at 6 minutes and then closes the first quarter with Tatum and the bench guys. What we're seeing is the 2-man game between Tatum and Brown is so effective, it allows you to, not have to overextend your star players, or if you don't need to have, 3-4 starters on the court all at the same time. You really just need 2. And I think the spacing that Hauser and Pritchard and Al provide is what opens up things for Tatum. Those are the things that we knew heading into the season. Now we're seeing what it looks like when they're paired with Drew with one unit and then Porzingis with the other unit. And then even a guy like Neemias Queta today, the fourth big comes off, gives you a double-double with 6 offensive rebounds. They're all starting to accept their role, and it's easy to get regular season production. I don't think, they're still not 9, after you get through the 9th guy, you're not playing any of these guys in a playoff rotation. But right. I think a lot of Celtics fans will feel way more comfortable 6 through 9 after we've played 26 games or 28 games compared to how things started, when literally nobody could make a shot and you're panicking oh my God, we don't even have the resources to replace 4 bench players, but they haven't needed to do that.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of continuing to cycle through guys and making sure that you can maximize your roster as best as you can. But it also is a luxury when you've got some of the most talented starters and versatile starters that can fit with a bunch of different combinations that right. You can start mixing and matching different things. And depending on the players that you add, you can come up with different solutions. So right. I'm definitely not worried about the bench in any way, shape, or form. It has been good enough. And that is, I think to this point, that's one of the final questions, right?
Right. And I mean, as any playoff rotation will tell you, you're playing 6-7 guys the majority of those minutes, right? So when you're talking about your 8th or your 9th guy, that's more foul trouble situations or injury, what have you. When we get to a playoffs, maybe outside of Al Horford, the starters and the top 6 guys are probably playing 35, 36 minutes a night on average, with the Jays playing 40 probably, depending on how the series goes. So it's important because I think we're all just get to the playoffs healthy. And for that, you need to be able to utilize your depth. But if we're talking a series against the Bucks or, any contending team in a 7-game series, if you're relying on, O'Shea Brissett or Danilo Blanton, you probably have bigger issues than, just your top 10 guys.
Seems perfectly fair. A couple more things, a couple of questions here. The only real major question that I have, and I think a lot of people around the league have, is what the clutch time offense looks like and the clutch time decision-making looks like. Yeah. Because when I think back to the actual losses that this group has had, there haven't been many. I think back to the Minnesota one. I think back to Indiana. I think back to Golden State specifically and maybe the process wasn't that great in those games, especially down the stretch where you had close games. And it just, when you start settling for jumpers and settling for bad shots, that could be a problem. Is that something that's acknowledged and that they will that you feel comfortable will happen and do better in a playoff environment?
I think it's acknowledged by the fan base. I don't know if the team does, and that's easily the biggest concern, right? Just because we've seen all these changes and all these additions, yet when they get in those same situations, it's the same thing, right? They're giving the ball to Tatum, they're letting him hold it. You're just limiting your options, and you're playing a very easy and predictable style of basketball. What I think need to see them prove is if Porzingis is on the floor, right? So, because some of those games happen where he's out, but sure. In an ideal world, but even in those situations, we just need to see, I'm someone who says, hey, you have all these other ways to generate offense. Use Drew Holiday to set something up. Use Jaylen as a creator or Tatum as a screener, because everybody knows when you give the ball to Tatum and he holds it at the midcourt and then he starts to go with 5-6 seconds left, that's just going to be a sidestep, step back 3. It just is. And sure, he'll hit it maybe, 2 out of 7 times, whatever, under 30% might be. But I just think in these high pressure moments, you've seen that, let's just try something close to the basket. Or at the very least, if you're going to, generate a 3-point shot, do it off an action and not just an isolation sidestep. Get somebody in rotation to where maybe you can pump fake and attack the rim. So the hope is that these are the early, let the players figure it out, like learn from their mistakes part of the season. But at the same time, it's exactly how they just lost the playoff series. So I think everyone is a little on edge of like, at some point you have to show that you know that this approach cannot be all that you do, regardless of if Porzingis is on the floor or not, because he's an injury risk. He may not be on the floor for a big possession in a playoff series. So you have to do something different. But it was the same under Brad. It was the same under Ime. It's been the same under Joe. They've changed point guard 3 times. They've changed coaches 3 times. The only constants are Tatum and Brown. So it all comes down to their decision-making at the end of these games. And I think that's what we're all just praying, that when it matters, they can adapt.
We will see what happens. I'm curious what our conversation is going to look like 6 weeks from now. That will be right before, actually it'll kind of be right around the trade deadline. So do you think we'll be talking about a new addition to the Celtics rotation at that point, or do you think they'll probably stay pat?
I think, I think they would look, right? They're just going to be limited, right? They have Grant Williams, $6 million trade player exemption. They got 2nd-round picks, but, I don't think you'd have to tell me who the impact player is that I would believe the Celtics would trade a top 8-9 rotation player. So in that aspect, you're looking at the end of bench guys. Well, you're not really getting anything of substance for a $2 million minimum player, in my opinion. Now, right, if someone gets bought out and they have a roster spot open, that's open for interpretation. But they could use a big, they could use a reserve wing. But if a guy like Neemias Queta steps up, if O'Shea Brissett has new life into his role, it wouldn't surprise me if they don't do anything major. But I think they're going to see at least 1 or 2 just for reassurance or insurance if a guy gets injured from now until February. But I think we have a pretty stacked 15 as it is.
Well, we will see what happens. He is Dan Greenburg of Barstool Sports. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Let's talk again in 6 weeks, all right?
Of course, man.